In this addendum to the many fireside chats, I find it necessary to return to script. I've thought about script a great deal over the course of my half-century of doing psychotherapy. And so I want to return to it, and I first note that it was Sigmund Freud who came up with the idea, and he said that it was a very formative idea, and it showed that people were not masters in their own house. They had something going on in their brain and mind that was subverting their rationality. He was right. People said that he was very deterministic and negative to people. The problem is the generalization that is made. I think that much of a person's life is prescribed, inscribed, and circumscribed by script, but not all. People have modules, and many modules are quite good. The problem can be when they settle into the negative side of script, because script provides a passion and a mission, but it can be obsessive and negative to relationships and negative to continually learning. It provides progression for humanity, and it can provide regression for an individual. It provides life energy or negativity. So script is quite important, and that is why I want to return to it. Now, you've heard me say earlier that some people are guided with a motivation that comes out of the birth trauma. Not all people, as Theodore Reich thought, but some are. I had probably a half dozen clients who had had a birth trauma, and it made them, in some strange way, very intelligent. I don't understand it. But they would be great in math and mechanics, and in some cases physics. Isaac Newton is an example. He was not one of my clients, but Isaac Newton had a terrible birth trauma, and they thought he was going to die. And he later developed a great system of physics that was a breakthrough. He developed mathematics that was a breakthrough for humanity. A person with a birth trauma can either be contemplative or they can be very intelligent and make a new breakthrough for people. So they can be contemplative and deep thinkers, and they can make breakthroughs. I don't understand it completely. I think that it has something to do with life force energy, and I look, for instance, at how a baby has such a tremendous immune system and wants to live. But some people have a birth trauma, and it affects them later on. You've also heard me say that some get stuck at the exploratory age, so they appear passive. They explore the world through their eyes and not through their body activity. They're not adventurous. They don't like exploring. And yet they can make a contribution, let's say in terms of being a meticulous artist, or in terms of doing crochet or knitting or making things with their hands that does not involve a lot of movement. And then some get stuck at the 2-year-old phase, and you've heard me say that you really encounter a lot of 2-year-olds around a university in terms of the professors or in terms of arguments, because everything is sprinkled with like 2-year-old negativity. Yes, but on the other hand, to the contrary, all, what do they say, au contraire. So I was reading a book by a university professor from Cambridge the other day, And I noticed that in paragraph after paragraph, he would use the word but in mid-paragraph to begin a sentence. He would say, this is said, but, and that's characteristic of a 2-year-old thinker. They are always noticing the negative in what someone else has said and say, but on the other hand, to the contrary, the real truth is, and so they are argumentative. And they can add to intelligence. They can add to knowledge. They cannot add to lovable wisdom because they're so darn contrary. So they always want to disagree. Now my foe in doing psychotherapy has been narcissism, where a person magnifies their psychological situation and makes it absolute right, the ultimate good, where they don't listen to others. Now they may insist that others listen to them, but they don't listen to others. And Freud is an example of that. During the 3 to 6 year old phase, he was absolutely adored by his mother. She called him golden, and she just thought he was the greatest among all of her children. She always talked about her golden Sigmund. Oh my goodness. But he did add a lot, but he wouldn't listen when he came up with his original theories. He said that the cause of neurosis was sexual inhibitions, and that's not true. You cannot get mentally healthy because you have freeing orgasms, as one of his students who followed up on that thought. That was Wilhelm Reich. But during the first 6 years of life, according to Freud and according to my wife and my study, a person will make a magnificent generalization. It's like drawing a broad line across a blank page. They don't have their thinking developed. It is infantile in some ways. For instance, Sigmund thought he was ultimately great in part because of his mother's obsession and her worship of him. During the first year trauma, the exploratory trauma at age 1.5 or so, and the 2-year-old trauma, there is mental obsessions. But when you move to 3 to 6, you begin to move to social relationships, and kids will make a decision about their father or their mother, and they will make a decision about how they can survive and not be terrified by abandonment, and so they have an adaptation that they develop. Now, let's go to marriage later on, and you'll be able to see why the script can be quite problematic. Some people think that problems of marriage occur because of sexual or financial issues, and that can happen. But the real problem that leads to divorce is the script. Like I know a man who his father was killed when he was quite young, and he witnessed as a neighbor came to help his mother. His mother was not financially astute whatsoever, and this neighbor began to take advantage of her, and he began to sell some of her possessions to others at a very cheap rate. And this boy watched this, and he decided that he would be smart about money and that he would never let anyone cheat him. Now, and in terms of his first marriage, he said the problem was sexual. It wasn't. The problem may have been because he put her in his script. Transference is part of script. She became the stupid woman who was like his mother and that he abhorred as a kid, and as he made his father grand and great, and he wanted to be as smart financially as his father. Children that lose a father early on or dismiss a father will accept some of what the father did. Like I know of another person who heard that his father was intelligent, so he became very intelligent. The President Obama heard that his father was good at negotiation. Obama became good at negotiation, but there was also a fault in it, in that he trusted people too much in the negotiation process. But getting back to this guy who divorced his wife, with his second wife, he had 3 children. And his wife was quite sexual. But he handled all the money. He made sure of that. He thought she was stupid about money. And then when she got older with their 3 children and became a little bit dowdy, but not much really, he found a younger sexual being to be with that he could control. Now during the divorce, he told her to play along with him and give him the money and he'd take care of her. She had very wisely taken pictures of all the financial statements and which she provided to her lawyer, and she wanted half. This drove him absolutely nuts, because in his script all women were stupid about finances. And so there were great fights during the divorce, and then he instigated other things that tried to take the money away from her. So the script is the real problem in terms of marriage. I witnessed in my childhood, my mature years, and up until I was, 65, I think. My mother lived to 96, but she was the older sister, and I saw very clearly her relationship with her sister, my aunt, or A-U-N-T, aunt, I think some people pronounce it. But I watched this for 65 years, and it was tragic to the extreme when my mother would begin to put her down, and my aunt would go into her rap of trying to answer this onslaught from my mother. We even have pictures of them in script and out of script, because there are other modules. So I don't want you to think that script always provides a good or always provides a bad. My mother was very intelligent. She read me a lot of children's stories when I was quite young. She had a good attitude when she was not in script. And I think part of the reason for her intelligence is that she wanted to ensure that she was always smarter than her sister. I mean, this is kind of nuts in a way, but I'm saying a script can provide something good and it can provide something bad. So what options do we have as parents, as grandparents, or as therapists? How can we relate? And it's definitely the case that parents and grandparents have a lot more power than a therapist. So part of what I'm saying, I hope, will be heard by parents who see that their son or daughter are in a hopeless loop with a lot of negativity to it, but how can you emphasize the good side of a script and negate and lessen the negative side of a script? A therapist has to be in relationship with a client in a script for a long period of time, several years in fact, so that trust develops and the transference is to a therapist as a good person on their side. Well, the first thing, referring back to previous chats, is presuppositions, or are presuppositions. They are grand as you define the identity of a person and their ability to have a relationship. And so presuppositions, if you study them, and I'd recommend my 2 books on the subject to give you more ideas, Grandparent Wisdom and Tell Them Who They Are, that's available at Amazon. Because you can tell a person who he is, who she is, and how they are in terms of relationship. And that never ends for a parent. You do it all the way to your death as a parent or your death as a grandparent. You can have impact with presuppositions, as also a therapist can have impact. But that is not the major impact if a person is really lost in a script. You can always ask questions like, I see that you get into this certain space where you think everybody should look up to you and treat you as the mother says this, as I treated you with great love and awe. But do you think other people are going to treat you like your mother treated you? Or do you think a wife will worship you like your mother worshiped you? So questions can be quite valuable because it sows into the person a doubt about some of the negative side of script, the narcissism of script. Also, you can be very much aware, as I've already said during this lecture, and I emphasized earlier, that there are modules that people get into, and some of them are quite negative. And you can say, you know, when you get into this space, I find that I want to go away. I don't want to be around you. In other words, you've combined abandonment and modularity. And it's a confrontive style, but it can be quite effective with a person. I just don't like it when you get into how grand and great you are, or how intelligent you are, or how creative you are, or any other good aspects of the script. You can enlist the positive side, this is another way, to fight off the negative side. You are super. You are great. You do have a command of speech, for instance, because somebody greatly loved by the opposite sex parent and thinks that they are always going to be greeted with love, transfers to a crowd that they're automatically going to love them. I think I mentioned Sarah Palin in this regard, that she anticipated that people will love her, and she can sell her personality because of that. And I've seen a lot of people like that who either the mother or the father really adored, and they anticipate the transference that everybody is going to adore them. And that's a good. But can you use the positive part of you being loved to fight off the negative part of you that goes into such narcissistic displays and really is revolting to other people? So this is another way to confront script. You can always confront along sachet lines, sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender, because you can see when a person goes phony. They will laugh, or they will smile, and they do so a weird entry as they go into how wonderful they are. And you say, underneath that laugh and that smile, what are you really feeling? Because the real feeling underneath will be scare and occasionally sadness. And you can also say, use abandonment again. When you do that, when you go into that phony laugh of yours, I just want to leave. I don't want to be around you 1 second. That's it. It's abominable. Now, I'm going to go back on one thing that I said earlier in these series of fireside chats. I said that a therapist and I could not figure out, or my wife could not figure out during our half-century of doing therapy, how to use disgust. You recall that Charles Darwin, in The Expression of Emotions in Men and Animals, which was a continuance of his showing how we inherited things from the apes, the gibbons. He was showing how they had certain facial gestures and humans have the same gestures. And I said we could not use disgust. Well, it so happens that a parent or a grandparent and quite far along, a therapist can use disgust. You can say, but I also perhaps mention that one thing that fastens a trauma is when somebody goes into shock and horror. Let's say a mother is shocked and horrified when her child reaches in back in a diaper and smears a wall, and that tends to freeze a child. And so if you act shocked and horrified when you just did it again, and it disgusts me totally when you go into that routine. I can't stand it. You're disgusting. Have you no shame when you go into that ridiculous display? In other words, you're again shrinking the negative side. Well, this will end my thoughts on how to confront script. It will also end the entire liberation psychotherapy chats because I think I have covered the primary material that my wife and I use to great advantage to help people. But I want to encourage you to not make anything we've said into an ideology. For instance, this about script, you check it out and add, delete, subtract. Just get rid of it if you think it's invalid. Live your life in freedom. Question everything we've said. Liberation psychotherapy is not a closed system. It's what we came up with, borrowing from many of the people behind me that would work with people. We were quite pragmatic. We wanted to say what was practical, what worked. We were not interested in developing a grand system that it becomes some type of closed ideology. That disgusts us. We've seen too many failures where people think this is it. This is the final solution. Liberation psychotherapy is not that way. So that's the way I want to end. Be open, keep learning, grow, discover, create, and keep advancing forward in your thinking and your living.